Cool. Oh no, I'm like literally watching myself live. That's terrible. My hair looks awful today. Alrighty, Ro. Let's not waste any time. So, welcome back to part 2 of the 3-part series of Passover in a Pandemic 101. And before we get started with the learning part of the program, because there's a lot to learn, lots to talk about, lots of good questions to answer. First, I want to say a huge, mega huge thank you to everybody who watched this and who sent it to their friends, I'm assuming, and showed it around, because the first video, the first part of this, and if you haven't seen it, it's not like they stack up on each other, but there's a lot of good info in that, so I do recommend seeing that if you haven't seen it yet. But that first video, which is the first and only video till now that I've ever done, got like 750 views. And I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's a lot, to me at least. And that is so humbling and cool. And I love that that means that there are so many people who are interested in Passover and halacha, and I'm not the only little halachic nerd out there, which is very exciting to myself. And thank you for watching it and passing it around to your friends and sending in questions. And I've gotten questions from kind of all over, people here in Houston, people not here in Houston, people who've been doing Seders their entire lives, and people who this is their first Seder this year, which first Seder this year. Good for you. It's going to be a fun one. So again, thank you so much for watching. It's very exciting and a little bit scary and very humbling. So last time we covered basic stuff you're going to need to kind of make Seder this year. And that was pretty much Haggadot and the Seder plate kind of specifically. And that still all holds true. I will say, as someone who's been kind of tooling around on Haggadot.com, it is a fantastic resource, and I highly recommend it if you don't have a Haggadah and you want to just have one that is free, and you can have all sorts of things in there. There is a bit of a learning curve, and if it's not your forte, give yourself some time to kind of mess around on there. Speaking of messing around, if you see me looking down a lot, it's because I have my phone here for when people ask questions and they're feeding me information, because my iPad is right here. So if you see me doing a lot of this, I'm going to try not to, but I'm so interested in people say things. So that was last time. This first part of what we're going to cover today is going to be, and this is kind of based off of a question that I've gotten, which is, the stores have shorter hours that they're open now. And this person was saying to me, I have to work. And this particular person is in the health field. They're a medical professional, which, like, sidebar, if you know anyone who is in the medical field or the health field, you should send them a big thank you message, and that I'm thinking of you, and you're a rock star, and you are the heroes for right now. So everyone out who's watching, also who is in that field, medical health professionals, God bless you. You are amazing. Thank you so much for doing your job right now. You're amazing in general, and specifically right now. Thank you. So this person was saying, I don't have a lot of time. The stores have very limited hours. I have limited hours. And I don't really want to be wandering around a grocery store. So how, like, if I was going to do like in a shot, my grocery list, taking into account all the craziness right now, what is that going to look like? And I just want to kind of point out to Jennifer and Ashley that my iPad right now says record paused. So if one of you could look into that and make sure that it is not actually pausing the recording, that'd be super fantastic. Thanks. So if you needed to go to the store, that's what we're going to talk about now, like a very quick in one shot. How do you make the Pesach shopping happen? And it's recording. Thank you. And then we're going to get to questions, because I just got so many questions, and very like interesting questions, and very like different kinds of questions, which is so much fun for me because I love answering, especially halachic questions on Jewish law. And there's some history and some other there's fun stuff in there. So that'll be the second part of this, probably be the larger bulk of it. And if you have any questions while you are watching this right now and you want to see me squirm on live TV, send me your questions and I will either answer them in the moment if I can, and if not something I need to look up, and otherwise I will look it up and I will get back to you. So the first part, if you needed to do your Pesach shopping in one go, what do you need? Bare minimum, you need a box of matzah. You don't need the 5-pound, 5-box mega. I mean, to be fair, I have that because my husband's Israeli and apparently they just keep a lot of matzah around the house. My father-in-law likes to keep matzah around just kind of year round. So we were FaceTiming them recently and they like literally had 4 of those 5-boxes of matzah, so much matzah. I don't know if that's an Israeli thing or like a them thing, but they always have matzah. So for yourself, if you are one person or 2 people, frankly, you need like a box of matzah because you need essentially a sheet to get through your Seder. Because again, to repeat from the first part of this, you only have to eat matzah during the Seder. It's the only time you have to eat it. And 1 box of matzah will more than enough matzah in there for you to get through your Seder. Additionally, you don't have to worry about like, oh, I need matzah meal, a matzah cake meal, a matzah farfel, because if you have a box of matzah, you have matzah farfel and matzah meal and matzah cake meal. It just depends how many times you smash it up. Better, I think, in a food processor, but you could just do the good old Ziploc bag and rolling pin method and just smash it. Or, like a big pot. So you can just smash the heck out of your matzah and magically turn it into really anything except for something delicious. Other than that, you need something to be your maror. And since last week, things are moving very fast these days. Since last week, the Rabbinical Assembly, which is the kind of governing body of conservative Judaism, so those of us who are trying to kind of bridge the gap of modernity and tradition, which I like, it's fun, it's difficult, but it's fun, released kind of like new guidelines. Not that anything's a new guideline, but kind of just things that you should keep in mind. And they had a whole list of like maror alternatives, which is even stuff that I hadn't thought about particularly. But they say basically any kind of vegetable or like fruit that imparts of like just anything that makes your eyes water a little bit and you go, ooh, anything pungent can be maror at your Seder. You can say the blessing over, you can make your korach, your little Hillel sandwich, you can use it as maror. So we talked about last time how like obviously so many of us are familiar with the horseradish in the jar, and that Israelis often use romaine lettuce, and those are definitely both valid. Any kind of greens we talked about, like the peppery greens, like mustard greens, and things that you tend to stew down with garlic to make them delicious. You could eat them raw, and they will definitely. Other alternatives, raw lemon. That'll definitely give you a bit of a kick in the mouth. Raw lemon could be maror, and it's something that you probably have around. I would say if you were in a pinch, you could do lemon juice. It is raw, as long as it's raw. And things about concentrate, sometimes they cook them down. It's probably not the lemon juice, but if it's like fresh lemon juice, or if you know that it's not from concentrate, most of it is. You would need to check that. Fresh ginger, or if you have ginger like in your freezer, like I put it in the freezer because I never go through that much of it. Fresh ginger, that stuff is definitely pungent. Definitely you're going to feel it. And hot peppers. We're in Texas here, so we've got lots of hot peppers. You will find hot peppers. So those are all really good options. If you need maror and you're making, your quick list, you need a box of matzah, and a hot pepper can be your maror. A lemon can be your maror. And those are, I'd say, pretty easy to find, even now with things being a little bit crazy. Your eggs are, again, in general, if I was making my short list of stuff for Pesach, box of matzah, the 18 box of eggs, a lot of eggs. Again, I know eggs are a little bit tricky sometimes to get these days, but they last for a long time. So even if you bought them now or you bought them last week, you'll probably be fine for Pesach. Even if you bought them last week, I think they would be fine. So eggs. Get a bunch of eggs to get you through Pesach. So we're also talking about what's the stuff you need to get yourself through Pesach. Big sack of potatoes. I would get a big sack of potatoes. They're good because they're a root vegetable and you stick them somewhere somewhat cool and dark. They will last you a very long time. And if you don't eat kitniot, you definitely are going to need a big sack of potatoes to get through this holiday in general and this year especially, because again, you don't know what you're going to find. And then it comes down to the bone. I'm already having trouble getting kosher meat. If you look online on Grow and Behold, that is they ship kosher meat kind of from all over. Like they will ship anywhere. They're already running out of some stuff because people know like, oh, I can order and get stuff and have it come in. But last I checked, you could still kind of get like bulk chicken breasts, like you get a lot of stuff still on there. I would literally finish listening to me and then go to their website and order if that's something, if you're sitting here stressing that, oh, I need kosher meat. Grow and Behold, if you can't find it here, is a great resource, but they are starting to run out of things and they're not going to be able to restock before Pesach, they've already said. So I would check that out sooner rather than later. And especially if you really want to have some kind of meat, because remember, any kind of meat can count for your shank bone. Do that. And I would argue that if you were in a real pinch, you could probably use fish as well. Again, vegetarians tend to do like a roasted beet because it bleeds and it is roasted, similar to the Pesach sacrifice, which is what the bone is supposed to remind us of on the Seder plate. Anyway, that's why it's there. And also learned this from the Rabbinical Assembly, because I was not familiar with this particular part of the Talmud, which is Pesachim 1:14. Oops, saying, got a heads up. They have frozen shank bones at HEB in the freezer section, the Passover aisle. That's good information. So if you really have your heart set on the shank bone on your Pesach Seder table, HEB, I assume that's the HEB in Meyerland. I would assume it's the HEB in Meyerland. They can order. You can go there and get Meyerland. That makes sense. So thank you to whoever has that information. That's why you ask your friends. The Rabbinical Assembly also kind of taught this a little bit from the Talmud, Pesachim 1:14b, which talks about an egg and the shank bone. Those are the only things on the Seder plate that are cooked. Fun fact, which is true, and I knew that like intellectually, but I just hadn't thought about it before. And they talk about the rabbis are kind of discussing the things on the Seder plate, Seder table, really specifically, and they talk about roasted beets and rice. And they're saying, well, no, those are the things that we have on the table. You're like, wow, roasted beets and rice, how odd. But the Rabbinical Assembly teaches that you could, by extension, do the same thing. So if you're a vegetarian, for sure, or a vegan, or if you just do not have access to kosher meat or eggs, or you don't want to use the egg, whatever, you could do a roasted beet and rice, and that would count for your egg and your shank bone. And I would stock up if we're talking about like you need to make you want to do one run and just be done. Box of matzah, just to recap, 12.5 eggs minimum. This is a very egg heavy holiday, especially if you are not eating kitniot, which includes things that help things kind of puff a little bit in a halachically, pesachly acceptable way. You need something for your maror, a lemon, ginger, a hot pepper. Maror is actually easier to do than you think. Something to do for your shank bone, you can go to the HEB in Meyerland and they have frozen shank bones, legitimate actual shank bones still there. And if you don't want to do that, or you cannot do that because it's the night before or something, you have other options in terms of, you could just use meat in general. And if, like while we're talking about just the things you need to get through for Pesach, the holiday, adding onto that list, potatoes, root veggies, especially if you don't do kitniot, you're going to need a lot of other stuff to kind of fill that gap. Frozen veggies, frozen fruits, fresh veggies, fresh foods. Remember, you can also buy eggs during Pesach. That's not going to be an issue. You could frankly buy your milk also during Pesach. preferably before, but you could buy it during. Plain unflavored milk. And if you're wondering, like, oh, I have a specific thing, I don't know, you can go on to our website, and we have kind of links to all the different sources that will tell you, like, this is everything you can get before, during, things that don't need Pesach Hechsher, which is actually a very long list, which is really, really good news for in general, and especially for now. And if you, just to kind of wrap up the short shopping list section, if you don't want to go to the grocery store at all, say you don't want to go to the grocery store because you don't have the time, because you work past the time when they're closed, because you are immunocompromised and touching that much stuff that other people touched and being in the same space, it's not worth the tzuris. Maybe you have kids to take care of and you don't have time. I know that feeling. You can order groceries online and have them delivered. You can order them directly from H-E-B and do curbside pickup, and they will just bring them out to your car. Things to know about that, though, is you have to do it pretty far in advance. And I'm really talking to people here who are not so familiar with like Instacart, 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 or H-E-B curbside pickup. Sorry, I'm speaking specifically to the folks here in Texas, the great state of Texas. I've seen dates for a curbside pickup is a week to 2 weeks in advance. So depending on which H-E-B you go to. So you want to make sure you have that order very, very soon. Instacart has been having some issues with their workers going on strike. So keep an eye on that, might impede it, but it's a great way to get the stuff you need without personally going to the store. Please tip them very, very nicely, because instead of you going to the store, they're going to the store and they have to touch everything. And that just seems like a small price to pay to have somebody take care of this for you. So please tip them generously. They deserve it. They're doing very, very hard work. Question from Facebook. Can you talk about what kitniot are? I was going to talk about that later, but we'll do it now. This is so exciting. Oh, kitniot. I love kitniot. I mean, I literally love kitniot, but I also love talking about kitniot. There are, and this is good because actually, yeah, okay. I love teaching. This is so fun, but I'm like teaching to like myself, it feels like, but then we get a question from Facebook and I get a text. So that's very exciting. There are only 5 things that you cannot have on Pesach, period, end of story. No one will ever let you. People can't say, oh, the conservative movement says you can do, can I have, cream of wheat now? What? No. There are 5 things no one will ever let you eat on Pesach, period, end of story. 5 grains, forbidden grains. And they are, and you're probably familiar with many of these. These are chametz. These are the 5 things that are chametz. Nothing else is chametz. These are chametz. Wheat and anything derived from wheat, like flour, like wheat flour that most of us have in our homes. Barley, like in your cholent, if you eat cholent. I actually think it's very mushy, but that's just me. People love cholent. So wheat, barley, spelt. A lot of your gluten-free matzah is made out of spelt because, as we talked about last time, all of your matzah can only be made from the 5 forbidden grains, because if they're not made into matzah, they're forbidden, which is why they're the 5 forbidden grains. Wheat, barley, spelt, oats. Fun story about oats. Someone asked me, whom I love very much and is very, very knowledgeable, said, I have this great recipe and I want to know, can I make it on Pesach? And I said, yeah, read me the ingredient list. And they say, hey, how about baking powder? I'm like, baking powder is actually fine. I know it makes things puff, but it's not chametz. It's fine. Baking soda. Baking soda is fine. Oat flour. And I was like, oh no. Oat flour is derived from oats, which are specifically mentioned as chametz. Wheat, barley, spelt, oats, and rye, which I would say is a very random one, but I actually literally have rye flour in my kitchen, which I just remembered. I was kind of trying to sort of start sorting through things with Pesach. I was like, I have rye flour. Those 5 grains are chametz, and you can't have them. No one will ever let you eat them. No one's going to say, well, make an exception. No, 5 grains, can't eat them. Kitniot. Kitniot is a category that expands and contracts. And kitniot are, They were invented around 13th century France, which is Ashkenaz, which is Ashkenazi, as in all of us beautiful Ashkenazi Jews like myself. I'm clearly Ashkenazia Torah, like very Ashkenazi, pure Ashkenazi. Eastern European Jews, which originally would have been France and Germany. In the 13th century, they were concerned that Jews were going to think, well, if you can eat rice on Pesach, maybe you can eat oats on Pesach. And so they said, nobody can eat rice because it will confuse people. There was also a concern that other rabbis had that people would store things near each other. Like you'd have a sack of millet, which is not chametz, and a sack of spelt, which is chametz. And they might accidentally mix up, or you might get confused and pull from one to the other, and then accidentally eat chametz, Pesach, which is a huge no-no. So they also said, for that reason, no kitniot. And kitniot is anything that could look like a grain that is forbidden, one of those big five, or that might act like it. I have a list. I have several lists. So there actually are different kind of, I would say, shades of kitniot. It includes legumes, beans. So, like chickpeas, any beans, legumes, to which often peanuts are thrown into that category. Though Rav Moshe Feinstein says you can have peanuts. Just saying. Seeds get thrown into that category. So sesame seeds are kitniot. Caraway seeds are kitniot. Hemp seeds are kitniot. Poppy seeds are kitniot. Rapeseed is kitniot, and that is canola. Canola, they changed the name from rapeseed because obviously, so that you can't have that. Soybeans are kitniot. Sunflower seeds are kitniot. And there are other things that are kitniot that are not a legume or a seed or a grain-like object, but just kind of got thrown into that category, like peas. I don't know why, because they're round. And green beans, which again, I think it's just because it has the word bean in the name. That's obviously not, because it's in different languages. It's still not allowed if you don't eat kitniot. So kitniot. Buckwheat kind of makes sense because you might think like, oh, it's like kind of like a grain, kasha. It's buckwheat. It's kitniot. It is not chametz. You can eat it on Pesach. But that got thrown into the kind of kitniot category. Lentils, because they're sort of like beans. Mm-hmm. So those are kitniot. There are other things that are not considered kitniot. So even if you're like, I don't eat kitniot, these things are not kitniot, but they kind of make people uncomfortable. And that would be like carob, coriander, cumin, safflower, which can make it hard depending on if you're getting oils, saffron, anise, chia seeds, coriander. And there are other things which are not kitniot. They might or might not be kitniot. It is debate, and that's peanuts. Like we talked about, some people will not eat peanuts, some people will eat peanuts. Again, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein says you can eat peanuts, and amaranth, which is kind of like a grain, but it's not one of the big five grains. Other people will say, okay, you can't eat kitniot. We're going to hold by those rabbis in the 13th century France, but we'll eat the derivatives. So I won't eat corn, because corn is also considered kitniot. We're going to come back to that because there was a question about corn. But I will have corn oil or corn starch, or more importantly during Pesach, corn syrup, which is in everything. So some people, and if your tradition is to not eat kitniot, and I'm not saying you have to eat kitniot because it's not chametz and it was invented and the Sephardim eat kitniot and they seem fine. You go to Israel and there's kitniot everywhere, and even the religious are eating them. I'm not saying you have to eat kitniot, but if you're worried this year about keeping Pesach, and you never usually eat kitniot, but you're nervous this year, then maybe don't eat the direct form, but maybe let yourself have derivatives, which would open your world up considerably, because you can now have things with like citric acid in them, which isn't everything. Corn syrup, which isn't everything. It might make your life easier. Kitniot were never universally accepted. Obviously, it's an Ashkenazi thing. The Sephardim and Mizrahim eat kitniot. There are some weird little exceptions. Some little subgroups will not eat certain things, but they won't. No one, to my knowledge at least, blanket says no kitniot the way the Ashkenazim do. The rabbis in the Talmud debated is this kitniot? I mean, they didn't say kitniot because they didn't have it. It didn't exist for them, but they decided like, maybe is rice a problem? Should we let people eat rice? And they're like, yeah, we should let people eat rice for sure. And there were other rabbis at the same time in the 13th century France who were like, maybe this is a not great idea. They were overruled, obviously. So that's kind of important. There was a question and that's kind of wrapping that up. Please keep coming with the questions. Keep coming. Now I'm going to start answering questions that I got kind of from other folks. Someone asked Ron last time, when did corn become kitniot? Which is actually a really interesting question. The rabbis in 13th century France, who really were the first ones to say, there's a thing called kitniot, and we're not eating them anymore. They mentioned the things that were forbidden now in a new category of forbidden that they were familiar with. So they talk about legumes and they talk about these different kinds of grains. But corn is way late. It's way late to the game, because the earliest that Jews could have come into contact with corn would be the earliest that any Europeans came into contact with the native populations of the Americas. So mid-15th century, hundreds of years after the 13th century. They just didn't have access to it. And Ron, I'm so sorry, I searched high and low. I did so much research. But there's a fundamental issue, and it's kind of the issue, I think, with kitniot in general. Kitniot, it's not something that was talked about in the Talmud because they didn't have it. They didn't forbid stuff just because it looked like or acted like chametz. And you can't find it in the Shulchan Aruch, which is the Sephardi basis of all Jewish observance. Like everything that we do basically as Jews, if you read the Shulchan Aruch, which is like mid-16th century, it's in there. And then there's the Mapa. Israelis wrote, they covered the Mapa, like a tablecloth, Shulchan Aruch, which is the table. So the Ashkenazi Mapa, the Ashkenazi tablecloth written by Rav Moshe Israelis, which kind of is just like the Ashkenazi rabbi popping up and saying, hey, we do this. Hey, we do this thing that's different. Doesn't mention corn. Doesn't mention corn. Nobody mentions corn. Nobody mentions corn because kitniot nothing about kitniot is written in legal tradition because it was never a blanket Jewish thing. Not the way chametz, of course. Chametz is written about blanket. You can read Jewish legal writings, which we have dates for because they are just masters of our tradition and they're the fundamentals of Jewish law and thus Jewish life as we observe it today. Kitniot in general were never klal, like generally accepted as an issue. So corn, for sure not. You can kind of throw it into the category of lots of other stuff that the rabbis, I mean, modern rabbis really, who wrote about things about fall into the category of kitniot, and they're saying, well, what about stuff, they asked the same question, well, what about stuff that even those rabbis didn't write about back in the 13th century in France when they decided kitniot were an issue? And they basically say you can't add to the prohibited list. There are others who say, like, well, if they act like those things, then then yes, sure, get rid of them. That's why it's a debate, because ultimately, it's not a fully forbidden thing like chametz is, which is, again, why I say you can put kitniot on your Pesach dishes, and you're not going to chametz them up. You can still use them next year. So even if you give yourself an exception this year, and next year you want to go back to not eating kitniot, go forth and do good. Keep going with the questions, or I'm going to start answering my own questions that people asked me. Booze. I get questions about booze every year. So someone asked, I'm like reading it off my phone. If I'm going to eat kitniot, what kind of alcohol can I buy? Can I get sake? If not, what else can I have? Great question. Great question. So there are kind of three kinds of alcohol that you kind of need to think about for Pesach. One is stuff that you might think is okay, actually, but is not okay. That's an important category. 2, there is stuff that you can drink even if you don't consume kitniot. That's a list. It's a short list, but it is a list. And then there is a list of things that you can drink if you do consume kitniot. So let me give you those 3. 1, things that are actually a problem. Sake. I know, right? Because it's rice. And rice, if you eat kitniot, must be fine, correct? Sake is just a problem because it has very few ingredients and it is made from fermented rice, which yes, 100% you can have if you consume kitniot on Pesach. Regrettably, there's often also yeast added to it, and yeast can, but also sometimes cannot, be derived from chametz. And I wouldn't chance it because it's not like, oh, well, maybe it's derived from kitniot, maybe it's not derived from kitniot, and either way, you're fine. No, chametz is like the big daddy, and you can't do it. Can't do it. There is a short list of things that you can drink that have alcohol in them on Pesach, even if you don't consume kitniot, even if you do not do corn or rice or any of that fun stuff. There are still things you can drink. First of all, you can always drink wine. You can always drink wine. That's fine. You have 4 cups of it at the Seder. So wine is always fine. Didn't even plan that out. If you do not consume kitniot, but you still want to get a little shakered over Pesach, potato vodka. Potato vodka is fine. Teton Glacier, Chopin are both potato vodkas that are on the Sephardi lists, which either we already sent out from our website or I'll just post and then you can find. I actually found an updated one for 2020, and that's what I'll be using this year, and I recommend everybody use. Vodka that is distilled from sugarcane is another option. Bushman's, which is an Australian brand, is sugarcane vodka. Totally fine on Pesach, even if you don't drink or eat anything made from kitniot. And though, yeah, tell you those 2. Slivovitz, classic, so Jewish. Kind of plum brandy, I believe. I've only ever had it on Pesach. And yep, Ashley's going to post the list of Pesach stuff from the Sephardim, which means that they eat kitniot. They're not Ashkenazi. Sephardim and Mizrahim also eat kitniot, so that's going to be posted on our website this afternoon. Thanks, Ashley. So Slivovitz, which is a plum brandy, it certainly is a distinctive flavor. I'm going to get angry messages from people who love Slivovitz. And tequila. So tequila is great because it is made from agave, and it is kosher Pesach in general. And also the nice thing about tequila, question about mustard. Let me finish thinking about booze and then we'll get to mustard. The great thing about tequila on Pesach is that even brands you've heard of are often kosher for Passover. So like Patron, Anejo Gold, Reposado, Platinum, Silver, Patron, Jose Cuervo, Anejo Gold, Tradicional. They have a couple more. They're fine. And Don Julio, Anejo, are all kosher Pesach. They're made from agave. And then there is people who consume things made from kitniot, which of course opens up the world of corn to you. And that means that there's vodka that at least I have heard of, because I haven't heard of those other brands. I don't drink a lot of potato. I don't drink any vodka anymore because I'm past college. But if you do kitniot and you want a vodka you've heard of, Smirnoff vodka, just plain unflavored, is actually made from corn, not from grain. It is not a grain alcohol. Fun fact. So those are your alcohols. Basically, short version, no sake. Sugarcane vodka is fine. Potato vodka is fine. There are specific brands if you want to really make sure you're okay that are on the Sephardi list. And your tequilas are fine. And corn-derived vodka, which would be like your Smirnoff, so that's an identifiable brand, probably easy to find everywhere, is also cool. There was a question about mustard. And I'm assuming you mean, so like the seed, you mean like the condiment? Or I assume you mean the condiment. So because mustard, if you don't eat kitniot, then yes, that's going to be an issue. Mustard seed is considered kitniot. So if you don't eat kitniot, if you are Ashkenazi and you want to hold by that tradition, because it's just a custom, it's not a law. If you hold by that custom, then yes, you could not have mustard. If you do eat kitniot on Pesach, whether in general or just this year, mustard, like commercially packaged mustard, I don't like mustard personally, but so I haven't checked the Sephardi list specifically. There really isn't a huge issue with anything really in mustard because it's distilled vinegar, which is fine if you are keeping by the Sephardi lists. Mustard seed is fine if you, again, keep by Sephardi custom, which is to not have an issue with kitniot. So I'm really sure, but I will double check that the Sephardi list actually will list specific brands of mustard that are fine. I'm really sure that they're fine, as long as you don't get something that's very, very out there, because again, flavorings and derivatives and just the nature of kind of how things are labeled in this country. So when something has like, natural flavors, you could look at the ingredients list and, it doesn't say what those natural flavors are. They can easily be chametz, which is an issue. It could also be kitniot, which is not an issue, which is why sometimes it's better to go by the Sephardi list. So at the very least, you're not eating chametz, that you probably are eating kitniot. But I will check. I'm pretty sure your commercially packaged mustards are fine if you eat kitniot. But yes, because it's a seed, you're right. That would be an issue if you are going to be very Ashkenazi about it. And I'm very Ashkenazi, so I get it. Question. What? That's funny. I know you have a baby. What kind of food are you giving him on Passover? I do have a baby. As a matter of fact, my baby turns 1 year old on Chag Pesach, which is true. And fun fact, French's mustard is okay, and Heinz, according to Ashley, who just looked at the Sephardi list that I sent really quick. So yay, French's and Heinz. What else is there really in life? I feel like that's the biggest ones. Those are your mustards that are kosher, le Pesach, for people who eat kitniot. So baby stuff on Pesach, yes. I do have a baby. He is turning 12 months old on Chag Pesach, actually the latter end of Pesach. So happy early birthday to David Svi. And because he's turning 1, I'm kind of like getting out of a lot of the food issues, because he was born, like we brought him home from the hospital on Thursday, and Friday night of last year, if you'll recall, was the first Seder. That was a mess. So he's only been a part of crazy Seders, I guess. So I don't really have to deal with a lot of the food issues that are on Pesach, because yes, there are some things you have to worry about, but honestly not a lot. And here's why you don't really need to stress. First of all, Similac, Enfamil, and Isomil are all kosher Pesach. They're not going to say it stamped on there, but they're kosher Pesach. So Similac, Enfamil, Isomil are fine. So you can go with that. And food-wise, your prepackaged foods, I know there's a lot of like concern about like what's in there. Anything that's just a fruit or vegetable and water, even if there's citric acid added into it, even if there's fruit juice added into it, it's fine. It might only be fine to the Sephardim, so there might be some kind of kitniot aspect. If we're talking about citric acid, there's probably a kitniot aspect in there. But I think you can be lenient when it comes to kitniot, which isn't even halakhically an issue. You can be lenient on that at the very least for your kids, even if you yourself don't eat kitniot. And remember, kitniot do not chametz up your plates, bowls, spoons, nothing. So I think you can give it to your baby and be fine. Cereal is an issue, baby cereals, because there are baby cereals. No, I've given my baby cereal made from quinoa, which is totally fine. It's kitniot, if you do the kitniot thing. Millet, fine, kitniot. But they're always mixed with oatmeal. They're always mixed with oatmeal. Like there's never just plain, not that I've seen. There's never just plain millet cereal or plain quinoa baby cereal. So I'm going to be very specific about baby cereal. So if your baby, especially if they're really quite young, and so they're, old enough to eat solids, but not old enough to have texture really, it's going to be difficult with cereal. And that's why I would say do rice cereal. Rice cereal in general shouldn't be an issue. Beech nut cereal specifically is mentioned by the Sephardim as being fine. And that's plain rice cereal. That's beech nut rice cereal that even has the flavoring added to it. Mango, they make like banana. They have a bunch of different flavors. There's an apple something that they do. And that is all kosher Pesach for people who eat kitniot. And especially if you have a baby, I would give your baby the leniency to be able to eat kitniot. And you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. I'm going to be fine. Our babies are going to be fine, please God. So we're going to be fine. Other questions? Ooh, okay, this is probably going to take us, this might take us to the end. So ask questions because I'm going to answer your questions live if I can. I heard there's a second Passover next month. Can I do my Seder then and have it count? You're not wrong that there is second Pesach. It is literally called Pesach Sheni, which means second Pesach. We're very creative. And 1 month after Pesach, so instead of 14 Nisan, it's 14 Iyar, which is my birth month. We use something called Pesach Sheni. And it kind of came up in the Torah that from where we get the idea, commandment, the mitzvah of Pesach and Korban Pesach, which is to do the Pesach sacrifice, comes from the Torah. That you have to do it on, in the month of Nisan, coming up in just a few short days, like week and a half. But, and this happens in the Torah, a couple of guys come to Moses and Aaron. They say, you know what? We're it's called ritually impure. We touched a corpse, and that makes us ritually impure. And you can't do sacrifices if you're ritually impure. So we can't do the Pesach sacrifice, but we have to do the Pesach sacrifice. It literally says you got to do Pesach. So Moses and Aaron, what do we do? And the Torah's explanation is carried over through the Mishnah, which is kind of our earliest legal writings. And it's basically that if you have some kind of impurity, some kind of ritual impurity, or if you are on a distant journey and you simply are not physically able to do your Pesach sacrifice, you can do it exactly 1 month later. So instead of the 14th of Nisan, it's 14th of Iyar, and it's called Pesach Sheni. So second Pesach. And you're not the only person to kind of bring this up. I've seen it kind of floating around, mostly on the nerdy rabbi Facebook groups that I tend to avoid, but sometimes I peruse. And some people have been saying this year, it's so crazy. Why not just wait? Why not just wait, a month and do this in early mid-May? Maybe then I'll be able to be with my family, actually. Maybe then I'll be able to get all the stuff that I get to make Pesach taste and feel like Pesach. And if it already exists, why not do it? And look, I'm a conservative rabbi, so I love being able to look at the tradition and bend my head and move things around and say, okay, where's the wiggle room? What can I do that's still within the bounds of the law, but is adapting to people's lives? And here's my reasons why I don't think you can or should try to do a Pesach Sheni, second Pesach, in a month. One, who's to say in 4 weeks things are going to be better? Things could be worse, God forbid. Things could be worse here in 4 weeks. And maybe there'll be less things available. And maybe, God forbid, you'll be sick and feeling less well than you do now. Who's to say in 4 weeks things are going to be better? I don't think that's a gamble. It's a gamble that's not worth taking in the least. And two, this time doesn't qualify as Pesach Sheni. It doesn't, you're not on a journey. You're right here at home. You have access to food. Maybe, is it food that you always have? No. Will you be able to sit around your table with the people that you always sit around the table with? Probably not. I'm not. Well, most of us aren't. But you also have the ability to call them and to see them on Zoom and see them on FaceTime. And you know what? Maybe in a month or more or whatever. Do a little Pesach Sheni. Traditionally, Pesach Sheni, if you observed it at all, there's a few little kind of mystical sects that do things on Pesach Sheni even today. And, but otherwise people maybe would like eat a piece of matzah and be like, oh, Pesach Sheni. It's a month later. I've already forgotten about how much I don't like matzah. So maybe this year, do a little Pesach Sheni, and if not on that day, then on a different day, because it's not like it's a real holiday that has a specific day. So like when things are better, please God, very soon, sit around with your family and eat those foods, because now it's safe for you all to sit around and to cook for each other and have the feeling, of being together and celebrating freedom, because that will certainly feel like freedom when we can just sit around with our families and be as close as we want to our relatives, no matter their age, and eat the food and smell the smells and watch the kids run around and get into everything. And yeah, so maybe in that sense, you could do a little Pesach Sheni. But Pesach should be in Pesach this year, and I'm sorry it's not going to feel the same, and it won't. I'm sorry. I wish if I could make it, I would make it for you. I would make it better if I could, but I can't. And so I guess we're going to wrap up with the opposite end question, bouncing to the other pole. Can I host a Seder for less than 10 people at my house if we observe social distancing, i.e. sit 6 feet apart, use disposable stuff? Look, I get it. People love Pesach. People love Pesach. The Pew study that came out, probably several years ago at this point, which is a big study of American Jews. Big study on American Jews. And they asked, among many other questions, Jews, and this is Orthodox, conservative, reform, nothing, whatever, Jews. What is, a Jewish observance that you do, some kind of Jewish thing? And they had all sorts of options. And if I was going to ask you, what do you think more Jews observe than anything else? You might think fasting on Yom Kippur. Not the top of the list. You might think lighting Shabbat candles. Probably like most Jews light Shabbat. No, that's not the number one answer. The number one thing that most Jews do more than any other thing, any other Jewish observance, is a Seder. I'm not saying they all do 5-hour Seders that last until midnight, and then you eat your afikoman just in the nick of time. But maybe not that kind of Seder. But the number one Jewish observance that American Jews have is the Seder. We love Pesach, which is funny because it's not an easy one. We love Pesach, and I get it. And frankly, I think that the reticence to give up Pesach as we know it is partly because it's comforting to keep our traditions as we've always done them, and partly because we don't want our world to have changed so much that we can't. That's a hard pill to swallow. I get it. I do. So I can see why you want to just still can I do my Seder? Even if I sit people really far apart and they wear masks and they eat off paper plates. I get it. It's really important. Seder is very important. The Torah, Deuteronomy 30:19 says, I call heaven and earth before you to witness. I put a choice in front of you, God says. Life and death. Choose life. That is the most important out of everything. You don't take a chance on life just to do a Seder. It's not worth it. And that's why you see the most observant Jews, whether in America or in Israel, even in Israel, calling on their followers. They're saying, don't gather, not even for a minyan, not to pray. Stay home and don't pray, they're saying. Very, very observant, very Haredi Jews. Stay home and don't pray, because it is more important to stay home and not pray, because it'll help you to live and it'll help others to live. And that's more important than praying. Because when we gather, we spread this virus to the old, to the young, children, babies. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. And Rav Kanievsky, who's the Rav in Bnei Brak, and they are extremely Haredi there, extremely Haredi. He got up and he said to all of his followers, if you put other people's lives in danger, if you think that somehow you're protected because you're so learned and everything, he's like, you're a rodef. That's a huge statement for an extremely Haredi, very, very observant rabbi to get up and say to his followers, you're a rodef. That means you're a pursuer. That's a halachic term. You're a pursuer. You are putting other people's lives in danger, which means they can shame you into staying home. People can bar you from leaving your home. Someone who's a rodef, you could hurt them very badly. If someone is pursuing your life and they're threatening your life, like by gathering on Pesach, they're threatening your life and you can defend your life. It's that extreme. He's not saying go out and cock people over the head, but he's saying it is to that level. And I think that if it's to that level for him, it's a message to all of us. And it's true because it comes from the Reform movement and the conservative movement and modern Orthodox rabbis. Everybody is saying, we get it. Pesach is so important and the Seder is so important. It's not worth your life. It's not worth your life. And maybe your life will be fine, but you're putting other people's lives in danger. And yes, Seder is very important. And yes, you should still have a Seder. And yes, you should keep Pesach. Don't eat chametz. But don't gather in someone's home for a Seder. Have your Seder at your home with your family that already lives there. It's not worth anyone's life. And if you're nervous about having a Seder for the first time, I can plug right now. You can watch, you can sit in on Rabbi Morgan's first night Seder with his home at 6:30 the first night. You can, if you have family, anyone with kids, I'm doing a 5 p.m. Seder on the second night. It will be somewhat abbreviated Seder, but still very Sedery at my home. You can check our Zoom links for that. And I also have one for young professionals at 8 once my kid is in bed. And all of our links below are going to have information on the Sephardi sources. If you're curious about Kitniot, please keep asking lots of questions. I love getting questions. I love answering questions. And I will see you next time for the third part and final part, which is so sad because it means we're halfway done now. So that's kind of sad. Join me next week at noon for the third installment of 3 installments of Pesach in Pandemic. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for listening and for asking such good questions. And I look forward to seeing more of your questions later. Be well, be safe.